Today, the Watch Collection Lab runs the Explorer experiment. And what these two watches taught me changed the way I buy watches forever. In 1953, two men stood up on the top of the world, and on their wrists were Rolex watches. The story of that summit became the story of this watch. Simplicity, legibility, quality so uncompromising that it survives at altitude, where nothing forgives a mistake. But here's what nobody tells you when you fall in love with this watch. Wanting it and knowing it's yours are two completely different things. If this is your first time in the lab, here's how it works. Watch Collection Lab exists for one reason: to protect your money from your impulses. Every luxury watch that you want to put on your wrist gets a prototype first. This channel explores Homage watches as road tests for iconic designs, focusing on dimensions, movement, and wrist presence to help you decide if the real thing earns a permanent spot in your collection. You do this by wearing the prototype and tracking your wrist time. And only after the prototype earns its place on your wrist do you consider spending the iconic money. Because here's the truth about luxury watch purchases. You can return a few $100 prototype. You cannot return a decision that you made with your ego instead of data. But this experiment, this specific one, taught me something even more foundational than the score. Therefore, everything you're about to see is the reason this lab's visual search method now exists. These two watches built that protocol. Look at this dial. 3 numerals. The rest are indices. Nothing else. No date window interrupting the geometry, no complications demanding your attention, no apologies for what it is. To understand this, we have to go back to May 29th, 1953. Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay become the first humans to summit Mount Everest. The watches on their wrists that day inspired the legendary explorer. But here's something I discovered while researching this episode. What Hillary and Norgay actually wore on the summit were Rolex Oyster Perpetuals, not Explorers. The Explorer line came after, inspired by the climb, named for the spirit of it, but not worn on it. So here's the question the lab had to ask. Are you drawn to the Explorer because of Everest? Because of the story of Hillary? Because of that whole summit thing? Or are you drawn to it because the story reminds you of your own story? For me, that answer changed everything. Here's what most people do when they fall in love with a watch like this. They watch every video about it. They read every forum thread. Then they buy it. But here's what the lab does instead. We take a screenshot, we run a visual search, and we find every watch that closely matches the dial layout, the case proportions, the hand style, and the dimensions. And we buy the closest match. Because your prototype has to be so close to the original that even a stranger, someone who knows nothing about watches, looks at both and besides the logo, they can't tell the difference. Now you've got a stunt double worth testing, and I learned this the hard way with these two watches. Now I need to be transparent with you about this. The reason I bought the Explorer in the first place was because I watched a YouTuber wear it as his wedding watch. And he built a story around it. He called it his Explorer because that's exactly what he was doing with it. And I thought, I want that. But I never asked myself the right question. What am I exploring? What chapter am I living that this watch belongs in? Now, that YouTuber didn't buy the Explorer because it was a Rolex. He bought it because it matched the story he was writing on his honeymoon. So why would I be buying an Explorer? Just to make myself look good because it's an entry-level Rolex? That's not a story. That's hype. And hype does not earn wrist time. Therefore, before you spend the money on the icon or on any watch, including this one, you need to answer one question first. What does this watch mean to you? Not Hillary, not Norgay, not to a YouTuber on his honeymoon, but to you. So these two prototypes entered the lab. Specimen A, the Tandorio mechanical movement. True sweep, vibrating at 4 Hertz, 8 ticks per second. sapphire crystal, correct dimensions on paper. But then we have specimen B, the Addiesdive. It's got a VH31 meca-quartz movement, and it sweeps at 4 beats per second, but they're kind of deliberate beats. It's correct on the size and on paper, and it's got decent water resistance. Both prototype scores are on the screen. Now, I was out wearing the Tandorio prototype, and I pulled up a photo of a Rolex Explorer on my phone and showed my prototype and the photo to the friend I was with. Now, he's not a watch person, but he looked at both of them for about 10 seconds. And he said, the hands are different, the bezel's too large. And that was it. And in 10 seconds, he was able to identify that this was not a good prototype for me. Now, the dimensions came in close to spec. The sweep is genuine, full 4 hertz. The crystal is sapphire, but the bezel kind of overwhelms the dial. I look at it in real life and something feels off, like you can see it before you name it. And admittedly, the hands are wrong too. Now, the other one was the size of the YouTubers. And at my 7.5-inch wrist size, it looks a little out of proportion. But at least the hands were right. But the dial texture was wrong. And next to the icon, it's a completely different watch. But at least now I know the correct case size for my wrist. And it shows at least which size watch I would buy if I were to buy the icon. But here's something I kept coming back to after the experiment. The Tandorio is a capable watch. It's true mechanical sweep, just like the icon. Sapphire crystal, and a case that wears other straps extremely well. And that last part matters more than people realize. When you change a strap on a watch, something shifts about that watch. It stops being just a watch. It starts being your watch. That brown leather strap you chose, that's a decision. That NATO strap in olive or black, that's a statement. That's your aesthetic showing up on your wrist. And when your aesthetic is on your wrist, you reach for it more often. Customization doesn't change how a watch looks. It changes how often you wear it. And therefore, it changes how much of a story the watch will accumulate. So that YouTuber wore his Explorer on his honeymoon. He wasn't just wearing a watch, he was wearing his watch. Every scratch it earned, every strap swap and chapter, every wrist check, a memory. I could have done that with the Tandorio. I could have swapped the bracelet for a worn leather strap, had the dial customized, named it something, worn it somewhere that mattered. And if I'd done that, this watch would mean something to me right now. Not because the watch changed, but because I would have put myself into it. The watch that gets the most wrist time is rarely the most expensive one. It's the one that carries the most of you with it. Therefore, customization isn't vanity, it's authorship. And authorship is what separates a watch you own from a watch that owns a chapter in your life. Here is what this experiment produced. 2 prototypes. The combined spend that couldn't even cover the sales tax on the icon. And here is my honest assessment. The Explorer is a beautiful watch. The engineering is real. The design is real. The legend, even if it was inherited, is real. But for me, it doesn't have a story. I bought into someone else's chapter. And a watch without your story is just metal on your wrist. These prototypes didn't fail because they were bad watches. They failed because they revealed something far more valuable. I was chasing a crown, but I haven't lived a story that makes that crown mine. But here's what the experiment gave me that I didn't expect. Remember Hillary and Norgay? They wore the Oyster Perpetual on that summit. The Explorer inherited their story. And an entire generation of watch buyers fell in love with a watch because of a story that technically belonged to a different reference. But here's the thing about that. It worked. The story transferred, the meaning held. The watch became the legend. Therefore, here is the most important thing the lab learned from this entire experiment. You don't have to wait for the icon to start building your story. Wear the prototype, live in it, explore in it, let it accumulate meaning on your wrist. And when you finally bring the icon home, the story is already there, waiting for a permanent address. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Watch Collection Lab. Watch Collection Lab. Watch Collection Lab. Watch Collection Lab. Watch Collection Lab.